Hey friends, I'm Scott Hanselman and welcome to Kafka Summit Americas 2021. When they asked me to keynote Kafka Summit Americas and talk about community, I thought to myself, who am I? I mean, what do I have to say about this wonderful community? I've built a number of communities. I've been around in software for 20 or 30 years. I've been blogging and podcasting for a long time, but then I realized that the right thing to do is to bring a bunch of community members to join me and share this keynote to talk about community. And that's exactly what we've done. So I want to introduce you to our wonderful friends, panelists, and fellow community members. We've got Nikki Tien, a staff software engineer at Etsy. We've got Israel Ekbo, the principal cloud solution architect at Microsoft.
Hello.
And Grace Jansen, developer advocate at IBM. And we're all going to chat about the joy of community and about community building. And I think this is a great way to keynote an event rather than listening to someone like me go on about a bunch of random stuff that's happened over the years. So I want to start with Nikki because I want to know how you got your start, not just as a person who uses Kafka, but how you started interacting actively in the community.
Thanks, Scott. I had to cast my mind back pretty far to try and remember how I got started chatting to Confluent folks. I think we were interested at Etsy in starting to use streaming data processing more, right? At the time, we only had batch jobs. And someone asked me, can you check out this thing called Kafka Streams, which at the time was fairly new. So I checked it out and I got really excited with the different things we could do. And I think I probably enthusiastically emailed Michael Knoll or someone like that going, oh my goodness, this is so cool. Can I talk to other people who are using it? And I don't quite remember how this happened. I do remember everyone being incredibly friendly. Michael in particular was a huge advocate for Kafka Streams, and he taught me a lot of stuff that I could do with it, gave me a lot of suggestions for use cases. But they invited me to Kafka Summit, New York City, I think in 2017, the first New York City Summit. And honestly, I was very shy, but I was really, really blown away by how friendly everyone was. I remember they asked me if I would judge the hackathon, and I met a lot of really cool people from Confluent there. They were also encouraging, even though I hadn't actually used Kafka before looking at Kafka Streams. And that just made me want to come back and give my own talks. And from time to time, people in the community would reach out and ask me what I was up to, what Etsy was doing with Kafka Streams. And that just made me feel welcomed and like I wanted to come back just to talk to people, get more use cases, get more ideas.
That's really cool. There's a famous quote about diversity and inclusion and talking about how diversity is being asked to go to a party, and inclusion is like being part of the party planning committee. So I'm hearing that when you joined the community, not only did you feel welcomed to ask questions, but you felt welcome to offer your perspective and be involved. That's a huge part of community. Israel, a question for you. Like when you joined the community, how did you go from being a question asker to being a question answerer? And did you feel that the community empowered you to do that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott, for that question. So I started very similar to Nikki, where I was part of a consulting team at a company that is now part of Accenture around 2016, where we had a problem to solve, and Kafka was the solution for that. So I joined the mailing list around 2016, just subscribing to it, the developer and the user mailing list, and I would just watch emails come in with problems that people were having. And then I will see experts, and committers and other people, contributors, they will be responding to those questions. So over time, you start to, compile common problems and solutions and links and all those resources. So that was how I got started, where sometimes, even though I did not know the answer by myself, but by seeing other experts respond, I would start pointing people to those things. So eventually, over time, I became very comfortable with Kafka Streams and with setting up the Zookeeper, the brokers, and all those things. And when I see people have challenges either within my organization or in the community, I would try to share those resources with them. I think around 2019 or 2020, I submitted my first talk to Kafka Summit. It was actually about community building and how to contribute and how to get started as a contributor. So I collaborated with Michael, Matthias, and one other community member, and we presented that talk. So now, since that time, anytime I have a new idea or a concept, I would try to submit that as a talk. But one of my passions for Kafka is when it comes to streaming. So KSQLDB, Kafka streams, that's where my focus is. And now, this year, I was able to start actually contributing, not just as somebody that does the testing or answer questions or present, but as somebody that is contributing to the core Kafka code base and documentation. So my first contribution for code was KIP 633, which is about modifying how you specify grace period for Windows operations. So that was how I started. I started by listening, watching the experts and how they were answering questions. Now I'm pointing other people to questions that were answered before. And then I got confidence to start helping other people and speaking and then contributing to the code base eventually this year.
That's fantastic. That's very exciting. I want to turn to you, Grace, and I want to ask a question about some of the challenges that new users and contributors may face. Like there's this sense of overwhelming, there's this big solution that's usually part of an even larger solution. What are some of the barriers that you think that the new users experience when they're getting into the ecosystem?
I think one of the biggest challenges that people face is being scared that, or perhaps being anxious that they don't necessarily understand this huge picture. I mean, when you think about people who are using Kafka, that's a huge network of various different applications in loads of different industries. And when you try and comprehend that whole picture, it can be quite daunting. When actually, as Israel was saying, actually, when you're contributing to Kafka, it doesn't have to be at this huge scale. You can focus down on a particular area or sub area that maybe you have an interest in because you're using it for that particular purpose, or you want to use it for that purpose. And maybe that feature doesn't exist yet, but you'd love that to be in your own application. So it's about not getting too overwhelmed by this huge overarching vision of where this sort of tool can be used and what it can be useful for, but instead focusing down on, okay, what are you particularly interested in? What skills do you have that you could contribute? Another factor I think is people think it has to be technical, it has to be coding. And actually, there's a huge variety of activities you can get involved in that aren't necessarily just coding. So do you have great presentation skills? Do you have great technical writing skills? Maybe you have marketing skills that you could utilize within this sort of open source community. So I think don't get overwhelmed, focus down on a particular area you're passionate about, and utilize the skill set that you have, or even build up new skills if you're interested in that. So they would be my pieces of advice in terms of why people might be prevented from contributing and why that shouldn't be a barrier, and why everyone can contribute something to cool open source projects like this.
Mm-hmm.
That is really good advice. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was talking to a community member recently on one of the projects that I work on, and they kept apologizing and saying, I'm not technical. And we heard this interesting statement from one of our other friends in the community that said, well, don't say that you're not technical. Say that you're in a non-coding role, right? You may not be slinging code on a day-to-day basis, but that doesn't mean that you're not a technical person, that you're not a solutions architect, that you're not actively improving and helping the community. Nikki, what do you think that is the most important thing to make a technology community like ours successful?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple of things. It's really hard to pick the most important thing. But I think to sort of build on what Grace was saying, really making sure anyone who's interested in the technology, anyone who's using it, anyone who's even heard of it and wants to find out more is both able to, get something out of the community in a way that makes them feel included and safe asking for what they need. And also for me, it was incredibly rewarding to feel that there was a place for me to give back as well. So I think feeling that you have something to give the community And Confluent, honestly, was really good at encouraging me and making sure I felt that there were lots of ways, just as Grace is saying, for me to contribute and to use my own skills and experience. So I would definitely say making it easy for people to feel that they can get something out of the community, whether it's advice, use cases, friends, network, anything. And also, I think the crucial piece for me would be just being able to give back in return and feel like you're really a part of this rich community where everyone has something to share.
That's a really great way to look at it. Someone once told me that we should avoid being transactional networkers. Those are those people that like want something, like I'll give you some help with Kafka if you'll help me do this kind of thing. And then it becomes a quid pro quo. And that's not a healthy community, trading things, really giving generously. And if I won't mention names or specific communities, but I think that we do know that there are communities out there with somewhat toxic leaders who may over the last several decades been super negative. Think about how positive their communities could have been if they had decades of positivity coming from the top. It builds a positive community and makes people feel included. It looks like you agree with that, Israel.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and just want to add to what Nikki was just saying. If you take a look at some of the communities that have been very successful, particularly the ones for open source, like the Kubernetes community, the Elasticsearch community, and the Kafka community, one thing that is very common among those three communities is that they are very open. They are very organized. So the people that are in charge of the management of the project, they make sure that everybody is included and there is something for everyone to do. So feedback is taken very seriously. Opening defects. Sometimes some people get very defensive, like, why should you open a defect? That's not a defect. I've been doing this for 15 years, 20 years now. That's not possible. But in these three communities that I just mentioned, what you see is that everybody's perspective is being considered, and also there is a very strong evangelism. So that is very important, because sometimes you might have something that is great, but if no one knows how it works, if no one understands how to use it, then it is pretty much effectively useless. But in this this Kafka community, what I have seen is that there is a very strong passion among the community members, and even people that are not really experts, but they are very good at creating awareness about the solutions and the ecosystem component integrations. It makes it possible for people that are brand new, like me, how I was in 2016, to understand how the system works and how to get started. And from then, you start to have, the community base grow from users, and then people start to evolve from just being brand new users to contributors, and then committers, and then PMC members. So I think having a strong advocate for the project, and also having an inclusive culture where the leadership is including people that are just coming in from scratch, is very important to help the community to grow.
So this is a very good point that Israel brings up, and I'll ask you this question, Grace. When we have new users, people that are just getting started, there's a certain confidence that some people get built in to go out and put themselves out there. Putting yourself out there is really, really challenging. How do we encourage the next generation of community member to feel free to open defects, ask questions, and contribute to projects?
I think a lot of that is sort of building on what the others have been saying, is about that support, about having that open community where you can just turn around to someone and say, hi, I'm not particularly confident. Would you mind giving me a hand with this? So maybe you can create an issue together. Maybe they can help find the right area in which you could feel more confident contributing. Or maybe they know of a particular challenge that might interest you, and they can pair program with you to help you come up with some sort of solution. So it's about having that support community, and really, I guess, that community feeling that you can approach anyone within this group of people and feel confident that they're going to help you out and spend the time to help you get more confident and more comfortable contributing more. I know that's certainly what I had when I first started getting started with Kafka, in that, for me, I was primarily in sort of the Java world, and I was interested in, okay, I'm looking at reactive systems. I want some sort of messaging system that enables the same characteristics. And a colleague of mine, Kate Stanley, who's very involved in the Kafka community, came up to me and said, hi, would you like to do a joint project, and I can introduce you to Kafka and you can introduce me to Reactive. And we sort of created this project, and it was only through her support that we put our session forward for Kafka Summit, got accepted, we started to speak, we built demos, etc. So it's really that community support, that sort of mentorship that can bring to help people gain confidence and gain that sort of familiarity and comfortableness in terms of contributing more, I think.
I love that. I feel like Nikki has something to say because I see you nodding in positivity.
Yeah, I just have a story to share about how important that, having people in the community who you respect and look up to, who are already involved, just bring you in. It doesn't take much. So my first talk in, I think it was 2017, after Kafka Summit New York, I was like, yes, I want to do this too. But of course, I'd actually never given a talk before, and I decided, what a great idea to give a talk at a huge conference. This will force me to do it. I love public speaking, actually, but I remember I was sitting in the back of the room before my conference, sort of shaking, feeling like I was going to throw up. Why did I do this, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember this really, really cool person sitting in the row in front of me. I was just thinking, oh, she's so cool. It was Holden. I am worried I will mispronounce her name, but Holden is just so respected in the community. And she turned around to me and said, "Are you okay?" And of course, I babbled during the break. I'm so nervous. Oh, this is terrible. I can't do this. And she was so kind. She just sat with me. She sat there with me. I gave my talk and it was great, but I remember something that really encouraged me to keep coming back, even when I was really nervous about my talks, was that I would see Holden there and I could say, "Holden, I'm really scared." And she would sit with me for a moment and say, "Oh yeah, this happens to all of us." Just having that other person there that immediately accepts you and says, "Yes, it's going to be great," instead of, you might expect they're going, "Why are you talking to me?" She was so friendly and actually took the time to just sit down with me and sit there and wait until my nerves subsided. Just knowing that she would be there the next time was huge.
That is really special. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, there's this sense of showing up. A lot of people, whether they are early in career or later in career, don't understand that much of community, much of one's career and success is showing up. And what happened in that story is you're showing up, in this example, as an early, in this community person, and someone who has been showing up for many years also showed up for you. And the person who's like, the elder in this case and the new person support each other. And now you probably have a friend for life in that community member. Israel, you've got a story as well.
Yeah, so mine has is very similar. And it has to do with code contribution. So earlier on, trying to understand how the streaming code base works was a bit challenging, but I was able to get started with that. But the actual part of getting the code ready for it to be compatible with the unit test cases and all those things was very challenging. So I struggled for several days trying to figure it out, and I did not make any progress. So I eventually reached out to Matthias and also Sophie Goldman. So they were able to point out how I can resolve those issues. And in about 5 minutes of applying what they showed me, the whole thing was resolved. But if I did not reach out to them and if they did not respond with the appropriate solution, I probably would have given up, on that, or it would have taken me much longer time to resolve the issue. So a lot of times, how everyone has said, having people that are much senior and further along in the journey to help those that are just getting started is very, very crucial in growing the community, and then making those people confident enough to now they can be able to be in a position to pull others up, into the community for them to start contributing. So without having that kind of a support system, it's not really possible for the community to thrive and to sustain the growth that is expected.
Mm. So what do we do when these great stories don't happen, right? If Nikki's giving a talk and there's no one there to support, if Israel's got a challenge and someone is not there, or even worse, some anonymous internet person decides to be awful and slap some person who's just joined our community remotely, how do we give them the resilience to continue and manage that in our community? Thoughts on that, Grace?
So I think this is something, it's a challenge that's faced by, I guess, all open source communities, in terms of there's always that risk that you don't spot something that might have happened that might put something off. So as you say, maybe someone's joined the community, they're new, and they get a negative comment on an issue they've opened because maybe someone else thought it was obvious. It's about really putting the time and the effort in to spend time, looking out. For example, I know in some open source communities, you can put like a little tag on, for example, if you've opened a new issue, and that tag could be that you're a new contributor, so that people pay particular attention to that issue, give extra support, and make sure that you feel supported through that process. I think similar things happen within conference speaking. So for example, when you're a new speaker, a lot of the time, conferences encourage you to put that within your description or your bio, so that when it comes to you presenting, they can be there during your talk, they can meet you before, they can help show you the stage, for example, and really give that extra level of support. So I think by sort of putting tools out there to enable you to identify yourself, if you'd like to, as a new contributor, to get that extra level of support can be really useful, whether that's contributing new code or whether that's speaking at a conference for the first time, for example. I think having those tools and those processes in place can really help. And then enabling your community to utilize those tools and to act on them is obviously important to give that support.
Such an important reminder that these tools and these communities and these ecosystems, they're not just code, right? They are people. We are doing these things to solve problems, and it is not just code that sits in a vacuum. Nikki, you've got a question about some negativity.
Oh yeah, I think this is hard, as Grace was saying, right? It's hard to know, and people can be really shy. I know I was at one point to reach out and even identify yourself as a new speaker. You may worry that, people aren't going to come to my talk. They're going to go, oh, no wonder she kept pausing. She's a new speaker. It can be frightening. But I think that's really important. I really like Confluent's way of identifying some community members who are very friendly. Of course, now that I'm talking, I can't remember the name, but we'll put it in the talk notes. They identify this group of people that are very friendly, really like contributing to the community. And I think make it very clear that if you are new and you want to chat to people to get started, those people are available to you. Just having someone whose role it is to be open and available for you to ask them whatever is really useful. And I also think just being aware of organic moments within in-person communities is so difficult and so important. One example is, Holden, as I said just now, turning around being like, are you okay? Because I was sort of clearly sitting there hunched over, shivering, terrified. And after my second talk, a very well-meaning person came up to me. This was unsolicited feedback, and the first thing I heard from this person was, your talk was not technical enough, just so you know. Of course, this kind of crushed me. I was like, oh, thank you for the feedback, because I really appreciate any feedback people give me. But I wish that he had asked first and maybe thought a little bit more about what he was saying, because I just come off the stage giving this talk that I put a lot of time into. And the first comment that I hear is, oh, your talk was not technical enough for me, just so you know. And so I sat down for a little while just to collect my feelings on this when the room had emptied out. And Holden was there again. And Holden noticed that I was just sitting there quietly by myself and asked if I was okay and how that went. And it meant so much to have another voice that I really respected in the community saying, look, don't listen to that. I know it was useful. I want you to keep speaking, and I want you to come back. It really, really means a lot.
That's really cool. Sometimes when people put negative comments on my YouTube videos, I say, I apologize. I'll get you your money back right away.
Oh my God.
I'm just saying, like, I've been doing a lot of free stuff for many years, and you're welcome to have all that money back, because I know I'd love to see your YouTube and your talk as well. That's another thing you can tell them. Israel, you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I have a comment. So I just want us to, be reminded as to why all of us are doing this. Pretty much everyone that participates in the Apache Kafka community is a volunteer. So this is all about giving. If somebody has has the courage to submit the talk got accepted, they're prepared to come and present, or somebody has the time to write code or write documentation, no one has the authority to shut it down or do anything to discourage further participation by anyone, in the community. So those kind of behavior should not be tolerated. And I think the Apache project has code of standards and certain bylaws that serve as guardrails. So those bylaws are in place, and they were designed to create a safe environment and a safe space for everyone. If something like that, happens, to anyone, where you are trying to contribute either as a speaker, giving documentation, opening the effect, or doing anything that tags you as a contributor, and somebody does something that is not in alignment with the expectations from the community, just have the courage to report it to someone that you trust, so that action can be taken, to discourage people from doing those kind of things. So I think it's good that we have guardrails in place, just in case there's an anomaly of someone that is not respectful, or somebody that is not thoughtful, or somebody that is self-centered enough to act in that way. So if anything like that happens again, to anyone, I will encourage you to, report to the right people, either in the PMC or the committers, or someone else, and then let's try to take action to discourage people from discouraging others in the community. So that's what I have to add.
I appreciate that. And that's actually a very good way to get towards the end of our panel here, that idea of guardrails in the community. So I appreciate that comment, Israel. Let's turn to Grace and then Nikki for a last comment and some advice as we talk about the joy of community. What do you tell our listeners, the folks that are watching and joining us at the summit today, Grace, about the one piece of advice you would give them to go forward in building a joyful community?
The one piece of advice I would give is everyone has something to share and something to give and something to add to the community. You might question, perhaps, you might be new to development, you might be new to Kafka specifically. I would say don't let that put you off. I was pretty new. I came from a biology degree and then switched to software. So, I was questioning, people have been coding in, Java, for example, which was the language I was using, longer than I've been alive. What can I possibly add to this? But actually, utilizing your unique perspective, your unique experiences, your unique skills, all of that can come together to produce something amazing that you can add to the community. So don't be afraid just from lack of experience or perhaps imposter syndrome. Take your skills, take your experience, and utilize it to add back to a fantastic community, meet new friends, and feel a part of this great community.
Fantastic. Nikki, a brief final thought from you.
I really want to encourage people who are thinking about getting started in the community but are nervous to try to shift your perspective. This is really crucial to me. Stop worrying, or try, if you can, to stop worrying about this big formless they, like, oh, I don't have anything interesting to say. They've already heard it a million times. They'll think my talk is not technical enough. Start thinking about what you want to see at a conference, right? Like, you're new. What kinds of talks would you like to see at a conference for someone who wants to learn about Kafka use cases, for example? You're just as important as they are. And everyone sort of is catering to this formless they when there's so many different people in the community that need a whole variety of different ways that others can contribute to the community. And I would close with one thing that everyone has to share and that the Kafka community really shines in is their unique personalities, right? Think about the Kafka Summit where we saw videos of Victor showing you how to do push-ups or kettlebell swings. Or the Apache Kafka for Kids. That was fantastic. And for me, a way that I felt a lot of joy contributing was sharing my silly drawings in my talk, and people enjoyed it. It's just something that is very me and that I like to do.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate all of you spending time with us today at this Keynote panel. I want to thank Grace Jansen, developer advocate from IBM, Nikki Tien, staff software engineer from Etsy, and Israel Ekbo, principal cloud solution architect at Microsoft. I have been your host, Scott Hanselman, and I hope you have a wonderful summit with all these great talks that we're going to enjoy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.